come to my mind. We had a great run of it. He's a great coach, and I'm proud to have him as a friend and proud to have had the times that we had. We just had a great experience. What? I've never been able to know why. That, not just that, but anything else. No, I can't answer those questions.
Well, good morning, good people. Mark Holmes here, of course, with my buddy Joe Bear in the house. Of course, Joe Boo is holding down the red brick house and making sure there's no bad juju there. As always, I want to say thank you all for watching, commenting, subscribing, and being part of the Joe Boo Sports Report. Without you guys, as well as you ladies, as well as you haters, this literally does not work. So let's get open for business here and let's wake up the football gods. And also, too, let's shout out to BetUS, because of course with BetUS you can get that matching 150% on your first 3 deposits of $2,000. Football season's over, but you can make those prop bets for next year. And man, I'm actually thinking about listening to Micah Parsons, who said they're going to be holding up that trophy. Micah, I'm going to hold you to that, and I will see you in Chantilly, Virginia at the autograph signing show, and will remind you that you said you're going to be holding up that Super Bowl trophy. Not one of these little tiny ones. We're talking about the real thing. So we've got some crazy shit going on with the Cowboys. And that is that Jerry Jones is not talking at the combine. Jerry Jones has been more missing in action, and I dare say, starting from the introductory press conference for Brian Schottenheimer, where for the first time that I can ever remember, that Jerry Jones wasn't the first one to speak. The coach actually was. And Jerry Jones has been very, very absent from everything that is the media spotlight. And we'll see. Now, we've heard for several days now that the Cowboys were close with Osa Odighizuwa's contract. And I have to say that tomorrow is the 3rd of March, which is 1 week away from legal tampering in the NFL. Yes, legal tampering, which means players' agents are able to talk to teams about contracts. Now, we had the trade yesterday, of course, for Deebo Samuel. They don't become finalized until the league year happens on that Wednesday, the 12th. But you can basically get everything together, much like the Eagles did, I want to say, before legal tampering. They already had that sucker written up for Saquon Barkley. So the question is, how did we get here? Because it was a year ago at the Senior Bowl that Jerry Jones set into motion a lot of empathy towards the Cowboys. Let's go to the tape of Jerry Jones.
There's not one figure or one number or one set of circumstances that I'll consider or will be looking at that I wasn't thinking about this time last year. Not one.
You talk about finding a need for disruption. When you look at roster turnover, over a quarter of the active players from this past season are going to be free agents. Do you expect free agency to kind of be an area where you can disrupt some things?
Again, I don't want to use the word disruptive because I think the plan would be disruptive to not do a free agent. As far as what we did last year, I think you could anticipate us having some influence here and being involved in some free agents, subject to if the right free agent we can get under the right contract.
And apparently we couldn't.
Is there a thought process of going all in? I mean, you guys have tried to win and plan for the future. Is there any stage of, hey, we need to go all in this year? Is there any focus or a thought process on putting all the chips in to put a win on the field, including what you do with free agency?
I would anticipate, with looking ahead at our key contracts that we'd like to address, we'll be all in. I would anticipate we'll be all in. at the end of this year. So when you say, is there any thought, I think Will Strainer will push the hell out of it.
Okay. Is that doing something differently than you had in the past in that respect?
Well, it will be,
Or just addressing the
it
contracts?
will be going all in on different people than you've done in the past.
Okay.
We'll be going all in. We've seen some things out of some of the players that we want to be all in on. And yes, I would say that you will see us this coming year not building for the future.
Okay.
Is the best way I don't say it.
Okay.
And that ought to answer a lot of questions.
There's a theoretical world where not only Mike is in the final season of his contract this year, but Dak is too. Are you comfortable with that potential, or do you actively want to avoid a situation in which both of those prominent figures are in the final year of their deal?
Okay, well, to answer your question, but I don't think of it as they have simultaneous last years. That I understand your question, and certainly that's accurate. But I don't think about it that way at all. As either one of them are tied together.
So going through on there, I'm actually going to give a little bit of plausible deniability, because he was talking, I think, actually, if you really listen to what he said, he was like, when we think about the contracts and things of our players, we're all in. And I think that was Micah Parsons, Dak Prescott, and CeeDee Lamb. And this was not, the perception of this whole thing was Jerry Jones, came out and announced, we're going all in, and things. This is really kind of piecemealed together to get a result, I think. And so we don't have this situation, at least right now. Now, we do have Zach Martin's retirement situation on Wednesday. He'll be speaking there, and I'm hoping that by then they've got some of these contracts done. And I'm actually hoping that the Cowboys are doing something actually big. Now, there were shockwaves in the NFC East yesterday with Deebo Samuels being signed by the Commanders, trading for Deebo Samuels. We look at it and we say, oh my God, they got him for a 5th-round pick. And, we ended up using a 4th round for Jonathan Mingo. We're inept. And, of course, everybody gets mad and worked up and stuff. I had some time to sleep on this last night a little bit more and started thinking about the Deebo situation. There is perception and then there is reality. And see, what happens a lot of times is we remember the best of what somebody did. We remember the best of what somebody did. For example, for a while there, towards the end of Michael Vick's career, when you thought about Michael Vick, and people were saying, oh, the Cowboys, they could sign Michael Vick and everything else, right? And you thought about not Michael Vick that was breaking down. You remember Michael Vick, who was on the ads for Nike, where he's like the video game. So we have a perception of a player being better than they were. Like when we signed Eddie George, people were thinking, oh my God, Eddie George, man, this is great. He's fantastic, man. We got Eddie George, but it's not the same Eddie George. Or I'll give you an even better one because a lot of you are too young to remember when we signed Eddie George. We could say Dalvin Cook, because we looked at it, Dalvin Cook, this big bruising running back from Minnesota that had like 4 years in a row of 1,000-yard plus seasons, just running over people. And that's in your mind what you have, not the last year where he was actually out of Minnesota and couldn't crack the lineup with the Jets. Was it with the Jets? Perception versus reality. And so knowing that Deebo got traded to Washington, I fell for my own things that I'm not listening to myself, because I'm remembering back in that playoff game in 2021 when he was just an absolute positive beast. In 2021, he had 1,400 yards receiving and 18.6 yards per reception, and ended up rushing almost 400 yards on top of it. Dude had 1,800 yards of production. And that's what's burned in your brain, is that guy, that absolute beast, and you just see him just running over defensive backs. You know, oh my God, it's wide receiver screen over here to Deebo, and you're just chomping up dirt and shit. You know, deep passes where Deebo was just there. The physicality is what was stuck in my mind, and just like, oh my God, they're going to be insane with that guy. And they very well may be. But then I started going back through the numbers and remembering that last year was a disaster for the 49ers because Christian McCaffrey got hurt, Brandon Ayuk got hurt, and, you know, they kind of went down the toilet. And so the fact that you lost all these players, for example, for us, CeeDee Lamb was like the only option. And CeeDee Lamb still thrived because we didn't really have a great, you know, number two. That's not to make light of Jalen Tolbert's 630 yards. But we didn't have weapons across the board like San Francisco. But still, CeeDee Lamb is thriving. So losing Ayuk, losing Christian McCaffrey, you would think that Deebo would help take up the slack. But Deebo last year was not good. And I want you to take a look at the stat. And Commander fans, I know you're going to take this as hating. I'm not hating. I'm not hating at all. It may end up being that this rejuvenates his career. But if we take his career in totality, 2019, 8.2 yards, 802 yards, 14 yards per reception, 3 TDs. His second year, 391 yards, 11.8. The monster year of 21 that's all burned in our brains, 18.2 yards, 6 TDs. 22, though, all of a sudden, shit got bad. He went from 18.2 to 11.3 and only 56 receptions in 13 games. And his success rate dropped below 50 at 47.9. Wait a minute. The next year, he rebounded a bit, 892, 14.9 yards in 15 games. His success rate did bump up to 56. That was a Super Bowl year. But he had multitude of weapons around him that were also helping to make it easier. But then this past season, he literally dropped off the face of the earth. The 49ers ended up drafting another receiver in the first round because I think that they saw the writing on the wall. 670 yards when you were missing most of your weapons. This is when Deebo should have rebounded and taken up the slack. And literally, his success rate dropped to 40.7. Now, again, this is a guy who has had a great season and can be a great weapon. And with Washington, he may very well be. But you look at the numbers, this reminds me kind of like with Michael Gallup, his second year, monster season. The next year, 800 and some yards. The next year, 400 and something and 400 and something, and now retired. So do we look at this and say, Deebo has just been slumping, and I can make the opposite argument with a guy like Randall Cobb, who his last 3 years in Green Bay were doing the exact same thing. He came to the Cowboys, rejuvenated his career, went from 400 some yards to 890, got a big fat juicy contract with the Texans, and then went back down to where he was. That could be, it could be either of the cases. So don't get me and say I'm just hating. But here's what's interesting, and this will blow your mind away. It'll blow your mind away. Because what you'll hear when you listen to the talking heads, they'll tell you, oh, Deebo Samuel's, boom, 800 and some yards total production. And that sounds great because that's adding his running and his catching. But here's the thing. His rushing, let me pull this over a little further. His rushing this past year, he was only getting 3.2 yards a carry. 3.2 yards a carry is all he was getting. That was not, his longest rush was only 13 yards. In comparison to his monster year, his longest was 49, and he averaged 6.2. So clearly, this is not the guy that we had our perception of before. Now, again, here's where you can say I'm a hater. Go ahead, say I'm a hater. But here's where it's crazy. I just for shits and giggles, I put up Jalen Tolbert's season. Now, Jalen Tolbert played 17 games. He played 2 more than Deebo. Okay? So I will give you that. Deebo had 51 receptions in 2 fewer games, 49 yards. 49 for Jalen Tolbert. Okay? Now, we had Brock Purdy throwing to him. We had Cooper Rush, for the most part, throwing to Jalen Tolbert. Receiving yards, 670 for Deebo, 610 for Jalen Tolbert. Yards per reception, Jalen Tolbert was more of a possession receiver, 12.4. Deebo, 13.1. But surprisingly, Jalen Tolbert had 7 receiving TDs. Deebo only had 3. So I don't know. I don't know what kind of player Washington's getting. Now, again, Deebo does not have to be the guy. And for Washington, the 5th round pick, you could look at that as a rental. And they don't have to sign him to another contract, although they did take on the whole $17 million hit for this year. Basically, you're renting him for a year for $17 million. If it works, hey, great. You sign him to a long-term deal. If it doesn't, it didn't cost you that much. I think it's a good calculated risk. But I think in people's mind, we're thinking that this guy's going to be, 1,000, 1,100 yard receiver, and he's just going to run roughshod over everybody. And I don't know if that's going to be the case. Call me a hater. That's fine. But the real thing that we have to look at here is, what are the Cowboys going to do to try and improve themselves? The Cowboys have a pendency, or Cowboys typically look to improve themselves solely through the draft. And we can see that Washington is not going to sit back and say, we had a great season, we went to the NFC Championship game, and we're just going to go ahead and just roll the dice with the same team. They're trying to get better. The Eagles are trying to figure out how to get Myles Garrett. You're in a position right now, and the Giants may draft Shedeur Sanders. They were definitely trying to get Matthew Stafford. They're trying to fix their shit. The Cowboys, if they don't do some things, they're in a position where they may be in the basement. So bold steps are going to need to be made. So I want to finish this off with the reaction of Deebo Samuel's coming to the NFC East.
Samuel is headed to Washington, according to our Jonathan Jones. The Commanders are sending a 5th round pick to San Francisco, and the 49ers gave Samuel permission to seek a trade in early February. Samuel had 806 yards from scrimmage and 4 TDs this season, the 2nd lowest totals in his career in each category. And with that, we bring in CBS Sports NFL lead insider Jonathan Jones. And Jonathan, for a lot of us, this is not a surprise. It felt like this was just a matter of when, not if. How did we reach this conclusion where Deebo and the 49ers part ways and now he's on the Commanders?
Yeah, Chris, I'm back home right now, but just spent the past week in Indianapolis. That's where deals get done, right? And so we are about a week and a half away from the start of free agency, the official start. So this trade is not official until March the 12th. But it happened because John Lynch was there at the Combine, was able to talk with teams, talk with his buddy Adam Peters, right? He employed him for several years there in San Francisco. Now, of course, he's the general manager of the Washington Commanders, and they were able to hammer out a deal. There was interest from other teams, the Houston Texans. There was some light interest from the Pittsburgh Steelers, as there had been for some time, but ultimately, it's the Washington Commanders. Deebo Samuel wanted to go there, wanted to play for Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury, wanted to play with Jaden Daniels, wanted to, keep his salary at what it was and be on a contender with an opportunity to rebound from his down year last year, as you noted earlier. And so that's why you see Deebo Samuel wanting to go there. Look, it's really remarkable that Washington is a destination spot now for a lot of free agents, considering what it was like there a mere 2 years ago or so, and for the previous couple of decades. But this is a credit to John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, the relationships that they have with their players there, because, look, Deebo Samuel saw the writing on the wall last fall when they signed Brandon Ayuk to that 4-year contract extension. One of them was not going to be around after the 2024 season. And so he asked for permission to talk with other teams. It's granted. And that is how we wind up getting here, where Deebo Samuel, no longer with the San Francisco 49ers, a chance to, get right a little bit with a new team. And that new team, of course, is the Washington Commanders.
So let's stay on the Commanders, Jonathan. So you look at a team that really did not have dynamic playmakers outside of Jaden Daniels and Scary Terry and Terry McLaurin, right? Now you add Deebo Samuel, who you think is going to be really motivated to show the 49ers something to prove. But what do you think is next for the Commanders as they look to build their whole team around Jaden Daniels, their franchise QB?
Well, this is the time period. This is it. And they have cap space. Before this trade, they were going to have about $81 million in cap space.
Take 17
Doing some quick math, it'll be in the mid-60s with this trade here. But we see their playmakers right there. Also, it's just going to give them another element, right? Because we know how Deebo has been used with the San Francisco 49ers back when he was a little healthier and probably a little skinnier as well, as that sort of running back weapon option, as well as that pass catcher. And we see De'Ami Brown and the guys that they have on this team that can also help out. Olamide Zaccheaus as well. So they're going to have some speed out there. Yeah, Terry McLaurin is the big name. Yeah, of course, Deebo Samuel's the big name. But this is another element to that offensive scheme and weaponry that Cliff Kingsbury has. And I don't know that the Commanders and that group necessarily believe in championship windows, right, philosophically. But they did better than expectations this past year. There's no question about it. And they came up short against the Philadelphia Eagles, who were a better team than the Commanders in that NFC title game and throughout the season. However, you're going to have to do a little bit more. We saw them go out and get Marshawn Lattimore. We'll see if that trade winds up ultimately being worth the high price that they paid for Marshawn, considering the soft tissue injuries that he's been dealing with the last couple of years.
Not every trade is a good one.
But if you can get a rejuvenated Deebo Samuel, if you can use him in the ways that he was used when he was one of the best weapons in football a few years ago, and if you don't have a sophomore slump from Jaden Daniels, right? If you can bring back so many of these potential free agents, Zach Ertz, right? He's very happy to be in Washington, but what are you going to pay a mid-30s tight end, right? And so there's still some questions the Commanders have to work out, but again, it's great that guys want to be there. And so by acquiring Deebo Samuel, that's going to send a message, one, to free agents who want to go to Washington, but two, free agents to be who are with the Washington Commanders in 2024, that, hey, we're loading up over here, guys. Maybe you guys should come on back.
Absolutely. This is the place to be. We're no longer a laughingstock, and for so long you felt like it was just going to be forever the way the franchise was run. But now you got Jaden Daniels, new ownership, and they are in a different place. Now, on the 49ers side, right, of course, they have to replace Deebo Samuel. That's not an easy guy right,
already
to
have the
replace?
replacement.
What is next for them as they look to change maybe some of their philosophy on offense in getting somebody like a Deebo, or maybe just somebody else, right, who's going to take the top off the field?
So because we have sort of known that it was going to be Ayuk or Deebo going back to the fall, this is something that the Niners have been planning and preparing for some time, right? I mean, obviously, when they went for it in 2024, when they paid Trent Williams, when they paid Christian McCaffrey, knowing that they had 1 year left of one of the best deals in all of sports for a team with Brock Purdy on that 7th round pick contract, they knew in 2024, all right, we're not going to be able to keep this band together in 25. Somebody's going to go. And so because of that, they go out and they draft Ricky Pearsall, and they extend Ayuk. And so Deebo was left out in the cold a little bit. So they've been thinking about that from a weaponry perspective. But what's next for the Niners in terms of what they're going to do salary-wise? Well, it's Brock Purdy. And that is going to be a very interesting contract negotiation, one that, the Niners usually, they don't like doing it, but it's been working out this way where they don't get contracts done until deep into training camp. They don't want that to be the case. What's going to be Brock Purdy's number? Is it going to be $55 million per year? Is it going to be 50? Is it going to be 45? That's a wide range. You can do a lot of things with that $10 million that you have in that sort of delta there. And so they're going to have to hammer out that deal. That is certainly what's going to be next. And then is there going to be money else to go around? We'll see what winds up happening with the Dre Greenlaw, for example. So long story short, the Niners knew that they were spending a lot of money in 2024 because they got so close in 2023 with that overtime Super Bowl loss. And then when it didn't happen, I think the purse strings were sort of tightened up there. And so Deebo Samuel will now be on the ledger for the Washington Commanders. The Niners have been preparing for life without Deebo Samuel, and now here we are. Once we get officially to March 12th, that life without Deebo Samuel will be a reality.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it right there with the Deebo to Washington trade. We'll see what we'll see, and I think we got to get ourself in gear and start looking and saying, how can we improve our roster? As always, good people, I appreciate you guys, and I will see you guys a little bit later. Peace out.